The 1960s were a golden age of automotive experimentation, where every car designer seemed to be asking, what if? In this countdown, we're exploring 10 of the most bizarre and futuristic concept cars of the era, vehicles that promise jet engines, nuclear power, and even self-driving utopias. From outlandish designs to groundbreaking technologies, these cars push the limits of imagination, even if most of them never left the showroom floor. Buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride. 1964 GM Firebird IV. So, the GM Firebird IV wasn't just a car, it was a fever dream of the jet age wrapped in fiberglass. Designed by the ever-daring Harley Earl and his team at General Motors, this marvel debuted at the 1964 World's Fair. It wasn't intended for a mere mortal, it was a vision of a self-driving utopia. The Firebird IV didn't have a steering wheel, instead it featured a joystick, because who doesn't want to feel like they're flying a fighter jet in rush hour traffic? Spoiler, it turned out that piloting a car with a joystick was harder than it looked, and most drivers hated it. Its tech specs were as ambitious as its aesthetics. GM equipped the Firebird IV with a gas turbine engine that could theoretically burn anything combustible, kerosene, diesel, or even vegetable oil. The jet engine gave it a top speed of over 150 miles per hour, but running errands in a jet-powered car, not exactly practical when you're using fuel that costs as much as fine wine. One particularly wacky feature was the autonomous driving system that promised to let you relax while the car followed a network of electromagnetic roads. GM genuinely believed the future would include highways wired to guide vehicles. Unfortunately, the future decided on Bluetooth instead. The car's aerodynamic design was futuristic enough to make UFOs jealous. With its bubble-top canopy and dagger-like profile, the Firebird IV looked ready to beam up to the Enterprise. However, with only one prototype ever built, most of its futuristic features stayed firmly planted in the imagination. Fun fact, while this car was never mass-produced, its design inspired the Batmobile used in the 1966 TV series Batman. That's right, the Firebird IV may have failed on the road, but it succeeded in Hollywood. Talk about a plot twist. 1961 Ford Gyron. Ah, the Ford Gyron, a car that seemed more suited to circus performers than commuters. If you've ever wondered what it would feel like to ride a unicycle on steroids, this two-wheeled wonder had you covered. Balancing on two wheels thanks to a gyroscopic stabilization system, the Gyron promised to defy gravity and logic simultaneously. Unveiled at the Detroit Auto Show in 1961, the Gyron was part car, part sci-fi dream. Its teardrop shape and sharp tail fins gave it the appearance of a land-speed record machine. Instead, the controls were as futuristic as the exterior, with a dashboard that looked more like an alien spaceship's command center. But here's the catch, it wasn't functional. The gyroscope tech was purely conceptual, meaning the Gyron would have tipped over like a drunken robot if you sneezed near it. The car's designer, Alex Tremulous, was no stranger to wild ideas. He also worked on the Tucker 48. However, even Tremulous couldn't make the Gyron more than a flashy prototype. After its debut, the only existing model met a fiery end in a warehouse fire, making it a true automotive ghost story. If you're wondering about the cost, the Gyron was priceless, literally. No one could put a price tag on something so bizarre and impractical. However, its legacy lives on as one of Ford's most ambitious what-if experiments. 1967 AMC Amatron. Picture this. Before the world knew Elon Musk, there was AMC's Amatron, the car that tried to save the planet before it was cool. This pint-sized electric vehicle debuted in 1967 and looked like a cross between a golf cart and a space-age shoebox. Despite its quirky appearance, the Amatron was a technological trailblazer. The Amatron's party trick was its groundbreaking battery technology. Powered by a combination of lithium nickel fluoride and conventional batteries, it could supposedly reach 150 miles on a single charge. That's impressive even by today's EV standards. AMC even included regenerative braking to extend its range. Unfortunately, these batteries were so expensive that they made the car financially unviable. This little dynamo never made it to production, but its single prototype became a symbol of what could have been. The interior was minimalist to the point of feeling like a rolling IKEA showroom, and it had a top speed best described as leisurely. Practical? Not so much. Revolutionary? Absolutely. So here's the fun fact. AMC actually built the Amatron as a response to a potential gas crisis that didn't fully materialize until the 1970s. Talk about being ahead of your time and still missing the mark. 1968 Chevrolet Astro II. By the late 60s, the mid-engine sports car craze was catching fire, thanks to European brands like Ferrari and Lamborghini. Chevrolet didn't want to be left in the dust, so they whipped up the Astro II, a sleek, futuristic concept that looked ready to dominate racetracks, or at least impress the valet. But as cool as it was, the Astro II wasn't a production car. It was GM's way of saying, hey, we can do that too. The Astro II had a 427 cubic inch small block V8 engine mounted smack in the middle, pushing out enough power to get your heart racing. Its low, sloping nose and arched fenders screamed supercar, but the real showstopper was how it handled airflow. With integrated scoops and vents, the design hinted at aerodynamics before they became a buzzword in automotive circles. But let's talk practicality, or lack thereof. Servicing the engine was a Herculean task. Mechanics essentially had to take the car apart to do basic maintenance. It was as if Chevy's engineers said, "We'll design it pretty and let someone else figure out how to fix it." This flaw, along with its astronomical theoretical cost, meant the Astro 2 stayed locked in the concept phase. The Astro 2 is more than a forgotten experiment. It was a precursor to the modern mid-engine Corvette. Without this daring prototype, Chevy might never have ventured into supercar territory. 1963 Chrysler Turbine Car. Alright, the Chrysler Turbine Car was a showstopper. The idea of powering a car with a jet turbine engine wasn't just audacious, it was downright rebellious. It ran on diesel, bourbon, or basically any flammable liquid. Chrysler equipped this masterpiece with a 130 horsepower engine that spun at a mind-blowing 44,500 RPM. To put that in perspective, that's more than 10 times the redline of most conventional engines at the time. Forget muscle cars, this was a literal screamer. Here's where things got wild. The turbine engine could drink pretty much anything combustible: regular gasoline, kerosene, jet fuel, and even vegetable oil. One owner famously fueled his turbine car with tequila, giving a whole new meaning to taking shots before hitting the road. While that may sound like the ultimate party trick, the car's distinctive whine often left bystanders convinced they were hearing an alien spacecraft. Chrysler built only 55 of these marvels and distributed them to 203 families across America for trial runs. The feedback? Mixed. People loved its smoothness, but were baffled by its quirks, like the 2-second throttle lag and its thirst for high-octane fuel when tequila wasn't on hand. And let's not forget its price tag. If produced for the market, each unit would have cost Chrysler $50,000, around $450,000 today. Sadly, most of the fleet was scrapped to avoid tax penalties, leaving only 9 survivors. These ultra-rare relics now sit in museums or private collections, living proof that Chrysler dared to chase the impossible dream with a jet engine. 1962 Ford Seattleite 21. So, the Ford Seattleite 21 wasn't just a car, it was a rolling crystal ball. Debuting at the 1962 Seattle World's Fair, it was Ford's bold prediction of what driving might look like in the 21st century, and boy were they swinging for the fences. The car featured everything from a modular design, yes, interchangeable body and axle configurations, to an onboard nuclear-powered engine. You read that right, Ford thought we'd be rolling around in nuclear cars by now. The Seattleite 21 also came equipped with advanced computer screens for navigation, weather updates, and travel planning. In an era where most people were still figuring out rotary phones, this was straight up wizardry. Ford envisioned a world where the car would essentially be your mobile office. Siri, eat your heart out. One of the wildest features was its proposal for magnetic highways. Instead of relying on fossil fuels or conventional powertrains, the Seattleite 21 would glide over the magnetic roads, eliminating the need for wheels on certain terrains. A great idea, but imagine the logistical nightmare of retrofitting every highway in America for magnetic propulsion. Shockingly, despite all this futuristic ambition, the car never moved an inch. It was a full-scale model with no functional components. Its sleek, teardrop design and enormous rear fins made it look more like a spaceship than a vehicle. Today, the Seattleite 21 is remembered as a symbol of the optimistic, if somewhat delusional, predictions of the 1960s. And here is the fun fact. Ford's designers believed that by the 2000s, cars would be practically maintenance-free, with modular components allowing users to swap out parts like Lego pieces. Today, we're lucky if our cars don't require $1,000 repairs for a faulty sensor. The irony. Oldsmobile Golden Rocket. The Oldsmobile Golden Rocket was a car so shiny it could probably blind you on a sunny day. Sporting a sleek golden body and sharp tail fins, it looked like a jet fighter that had decided to moonlight as a luxury coupe. Debuting at the 1956 General Motors Motorama, the Golden Rocket was a futuristic fever dream brought to life. One of the car's most bizarre features was its self-adjusting driver's seat. Upon opening the gull wing doors, the driver's seat would automatically rise and swivel to help you climb in. Fancy, right? Except this feature worked only in theory. In practice, it was more like a very slow-moving office chair. Under the hood, the Golden Rocket packed a V8 engine, but let's be real, it was more about looking cool than going fast. The car was built on a fiberglass body, making it lighter than most production cars of its time. However, with only one prototype ever built, its performance was never properly tested. Here's the kicker. While it dazzled audiences at auto shows, the Golden Rocket was deemed too radical for mass production. Oldsmobile shelved the project, and the lone prototype became a museum piece, occasionally popping up to remind us of an era when cars were designed with pure imagination. Fun fact, the Golden Rocket's design heavily influenced the future styling of Oldsmobile models. Even though it never hit the streets, its DNA lived on in the form of tail fins and futuristic curves on cars throughout the late 1950s and early 60s. 1963 Studebaker Scepter. The Studebaker Scepter was more than just a car. It was Studebaker's Hail Mary pass to stay in business. Designed by Brooks Stevens, the Scepter was a four-door sedan with an edgy, futuristic design, some truly strange features. Imagine a car with a glass roof and a telephone mounted in the dashboard. Yes, the Scepter predicted the car phone revolution decades before it happened. One of the most striking aspects of the Scepter was its almost aquarium-like roof. The giant panes of glass gave passengers a panoramic view of the world around them. But let's be honest, driving this thing on a sunny day would have required industrial-strength sunscreen. Its grille and headlights, which looked like they belonged on a robot's face, gave it a unique, slightly unsettling personality. Technically, the Scepter wasn't half bad. It had a V8 engine borrowed from the Studebaker Hawk, and it could theoretically reach respectable speeds for a sedan of its size. However, by 1966, Studebaker was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, and the Scepter's production costs were deemed too high. Sadly, the Scepter never went into full production, and Studebaker shut its doors shortly after. The lone prototype now resides in the Studebaker National Museum, a bittersweet reminder of a car that could have saved the company, or at least delayed the inevitable. Fun fact, the Scepter's dashboard featured push-button controls and a strip speedometer, ideas that were ahead of their time, but would later appear in mass-market cars during the 1980s. 1965 Dodge Diora. The Dodge Diora is what happens when a surfboard designer and an auto engineer decide to make a pickup truck. Created by Mike and Larry Alexander, this custom concept was Dodge's attempt at reimagining the utility vehicle. It didn't have a conventional door. Instead, you entered through the front windshield, which tilted forward on hydraulic hinges. Practical? Not at all. Cool? You bet. Based on the Dodge A100 pickup, the Diora featured a completely reimagined body with a low, sleek design that looked like it was built to race across a California beach rather than haul lumber. The truck bed was covered, turning it into more of a cargo pod than a utility vehicle. The Diora debuted at the Detroit Autorama in 1965 and quickly became a hit. Its striking looks earned it several awards, and it even became one of the first vehicles immortalized as a Hot Wheels die-cast toy. However, as a real-world vehicle, it was as impractical as wearing stilettos to a height. Fun fact, the Diora was sold at auction in 2009 for $324,500, proving that even the weirdest cars can fetch astronomical prices when they become icons of design. 1964 Pontiac XP833 Banshee. The Pontiac XP833 Banshee was Pontiac's not-so-subtle attempt to build a Corvette killer. Designed by John DeLorean, yes, that DeLorean, the Banshee was a lightweight, fiberglass-bodied sports car that oozed performance potential. Its sharp, angular design was a bold departure from Pontiac's usual muscle car aesthetic. Under the hood, the Banshee packed either an inline-6 or a V8 engine, depending on the prototype, and weighed under 2,200 pounds. That made it light, fast, and terrifyingly fun to drive. However, the Banshee's real tragedy was corporate politics. GM's execs, afraid it would cannibalize Corvette sales, killed the project before it could reach production. Only two prototypes were ever made, one coupe and one convertible. Both are now prized collector's items, with the coupe fetching over $600,000 at auction in recent years. Fun fact, the Banshee's design heavily influenced the third-generation Corvette, proving that even a failed concept can leave a lasting legacy. Fun fact, DeLorean was so frustrated by the Banshee's cancellation that it partly inspired his decision to leave GM and start his own company. So, in a way, this car is indirectly responsible for the infamous DeLorean DMC-12.